Welcome to the Word Weaver podcast, a literary place in cyberspace where I share tangible tips, tricks, and words of wisdom to help you achieve your dream of writing a book. I'm your host, Louise Johnson, a writer and the author of Behind the Red Door. Let's dive into today's chapter. Hello, welcome back to the Word Weaver podcast. I'm your host, Louise Claire Johnson. I'm currently in Norway Bay, Quebec at my parents' cottage. It's this beautiful little corner of the earth outside of Ottawa. It's on the Ottawa River, but it's on the Quebec side, so kind of between Ottawa and Montreal. And you can probably hear the waves in the water in the background. I debated whether I should close the screen door to record this podcast, but it's just so nice. It's a beautiful morning. Hopefully, this isn't too muffled. I have my second cup of coffee here in a Denny's coffee mug. It says, "It's always sunny side up in a diner" on the back of it. So sipping my coffee and recording a couple podcast episodes while I can, so I stay consistent with these weekly episodes. I'm really, really enjoying being back and podcasting. It is full on with the editing and the background and everything, but I'm having the best time, and it's really a great way for me to talk about topical things and things that I'm going through in my own writing life. So I hope you are feeling the same way. If you are a writer out there and trying to publish a book, we're in this together. So in today's episode, what I want to talk to you about is an affliction that I think affects almost every writer I know, at least once in their writing career, if not multiple times. I am personally guilty of coming down with a bad case of shiny object syndrome, most often when I am in the messy, muddled middle of a manuscript. Jesus, try saying that 10 times fast. The messy, muddled middle of a manuscript. Anyway, so basically it's when the fresh, shiny, glittery, sparkly new idea and rush of adrenaline has worn off of starting a new book project, and I'm confronted with the reality of the beast that is in front of me, all that I still have to do. I probably don't even see the finish line of finishing this book or what it will look like, and I just think of all the steps, or I'm just stuck in the middle of a manuscript of a new book idea and I'm not liking the direction that it's going. I don't know really what I want to do with these characters. They're taking on a life of their own that I'm not necessarily happy with. You've probably all been there before. I guess a lot of people would refer to this feeling of being stuck on a book project as writer's block. But essentially, it's when the shiny new idea has tarnished, has worn off, and it becomes much more enticing, a lot more exciting to open your ideas and inspiration notebook or open that iPhone app and start researching a brand new book idea, something that is a lot more glittery and shiny in your brain. It is untapped potential. And you start playing with that idea. For me, that can look like putting the current work in progress that I am working on or that I need to be working on the back burner. And I start playing with character profiles. I will go on Pinterest to look up different pictures and start creating a Pinterest board of who I want the characters in my new book to be. I might open Scrivener and start jotting down little sections of a scene or a setting, really cinematic, that I want to include in the new book. The fun playing part of beginning a new manuscript, which really is just a form of procrastination and putting off the hard thing, which is being stuck in that messy, muddled middle of my current work in progress and just not wanting to face it, not wanting to deal with the hard task ahead of me. My brain is trying to tell me, okay, take a break, do something a little bit more fun. It's trying to protect me from the challenge ahead. But really, this is where the intersection of growth happens. And I would argue this is what separates a professionally published author with someone who just wants to write a book, is really how can you handle this shiny object syndrome. Can you finish the task that you first started, even when it gets hard, and not be dazzled and thrown off track by the shiny, glittery other opportunities? Even it might not be a new book idea. It could be just something as fun as, oh, I want to go on that trip. I want to go out for drinks with my girlfriends. That's a shiny object that's kind of getting in the way of your current work in progress. So, in today's episode, all about shiny object syndrome, which is something that I am currently dealing with, I want to break it down further into what is it, why does it happen, and how can we avoid it or learn to deal with it? Because I don't think for me personally, it's something that's going to go away. It's that little devil on my shoulder that always crops up every single time without fail when I'm working on a new book and I hit that middle or I hit an obstacle and something feels hard and insurmountable. Little shiny object syndrome crops up and says, hey, I have something more fun and exciting that's still book related. So your mind feels like, okay, it's not that bad to switch projects because it could be the book that lands you on the New York Times bestseller list. Maybe this idea is better and it's still part of your work, your career as an author. It's not going too far off track. It's very confusing when it does pop up. That's why I call it the little devil on my shoulder. It is so enticing to want to give into that feeling. And in the moment, you don't see the downsides, you don't see the consequences of switching. So let's go through the actual definition of what is shiny object syndrome. It is essentially any situation where people focus undue attention onto an idea that is new, exciting, and trendy, yet drop it in its entirety as soon as something else new, exciting, and trendy comes along and can take its place. As soon as that idea doesn't become fun or fresh or exciting anymore, we replace it with another shiny object, and the pattern just continues. It becomes cyclical. And like I said, it can be a deceiving little bugger because once you're hit with shiny object syndrome, in the moment, it seems like something worth focusing on. But ultimately, it is a distraction and something that can cloud your judgment and your focus and derail you from the bigger picture, the bigger task at hand. And I think writers are especially susceptible to succumbing to shiny object syndrome because once you actually start writing a book, you see how much work and time and energy goes into it. It becomes really challenging. It becomes this huge mountain that seems incredibly challenging to summit. So when the going gets tough, our brain gets hit with shiny object syndrome and wants to focus on something smaller, more bite-sized, more manageable that we feel we can accomplish. So that could be, like I mentioned, my personal example, going on Pinterest, creating fun character arcs in a Pinterest board. That's a fun, shiny task on a new idea, but really it's getting me bogged down in the minutia and I lose sight of the bigger picture of why I started this book in the first place. And the funny thing is, once I start down the path of following this new shiny book idea after I create these fun character profiles, put them in Scrivener, and I actually sit down to start writing that book, once I hit that challenge in the middle, I'm going to start it all over again. So then you are just left with all of these unfinished works in progress, and you never actually accomplish your big picture goal of becoming a published author with multiple books on shelf in a bookstore, which is really what we all want at the end of the day. So, how can we grapple with this now that we know what the definition is? Why does it happen to us? And what can we do about it? So one of the big questions is, why does this happen? Why are we as writers hit with shiny object syndrome so frequently? What is this psychological phenomenon? And essentially, it is a psychological phenomenon that happens. It's something that happens in the brain. It is part of our defense mechanisms that happens when we are confronted with fear. And really, I would say this is what it all boils down to is fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of not being good enough, fear of being laughed at, fear of not being able to finish, fear of missing out on what else is going on, or fear of missing out on these shiny, new, exciting ideas and trends in publishing. And really, that is kind of the root or the crux of this whole issue is confronting our own fear when it comes to writing. And I would say another part really has to do with this technological social media world that we live in. We are so used to immediate gratification, whether it's a quick like, a quick hit of adrenaline or endorphins from posting a new Instagram, to reading short little captions on Twitter or X, even the speed at which we get deliveries. Like if Amazon can deliver the very next day, we are conditioned to think that is normal, that something we order online can immediately be at our fingertips the next day. We are not taking into consideration the truck and the emissions and how that actually arrived at our door magically so quickly. Immediate gratification is what we now expect. And being a writer, being an author, producing a body of work takes a lot of time. There is no immediate gratification to being a published author. If anything, is the complete opposite end of the spectrum. It takes a long time to write a book, have it edited, get a literary agent if you don't already have one, go through the publishing process. I always say a lot of people are surprised that when you sell a book, it's not actually on shelf for another 1 to 2 years, depending where you are in your career. I mean, if you're pumping them out quickly, but even Colleen Hoover, who publishes multiple books and people buy them, so the publisher is pumping them out quicker, her books often don't come out at least once a year. Carly Fortune, she's published a book a year, but still, she could probably have had it out earlier. It just has to go through this 12-month machine of getting in line behind other authors. Only so many books can be published a quarter, has to go through interior formatting, a rigorous editing process, the cover design, the marketing and sales plan. There's a lot of things that go in behind the scenes. So even basically what I'm saying is that on the quick end of the spectrum as an author, it still takes a year. So this is a long game. And it can be really hard that there's no immediate gratification of seeing your name on the book cover in a bookstore a month or 2 months or 6 months after you write the first draft. We are in this for the long-term satisfaction of a long-lasting career and because we really like the process, we really like the journey. But we have to get used to the fact that you won't get those accolades. And we're sitting on all of these juicy things alone in our rooms behind our computers. So that's why shiny object syndrome really kind of is something that we grapple with. I know, particularly for me, another thing that often happens is a book is taking so long. I haven't had something published in a while, so I will put it on hold to write an article. For me, that is a quick hit of instant gratification of, okay, I can write an article and it can be out in the newspaper or a magazine within months or often weeks because of the way the news cycle goes. So I can write something and have it published quickly in an article form, whereas a book takes years. And that for me is a form of shiny object syndrome. It takes multiple variations, multiple formats. So you have to be kind of aware of where is the distraction coming from when it comes to shiny object syndrome. And oftentimes it happens when you are frustrated with your goals and the lack of progress that you're seeing. It suddenly feels unachievable to write and publish a book, but writing and publishing an article feels a lot more manageable. It's a bite-sized, smaller task, so our brain switches to that shiny object. We see this happen in childhood. A kid can be playing with a toy, it's perfectly fine, but then they see someone else playing with another toy, so they go and want that. For me, another example that immediately comes to mind is dating. We see it with the influx of dating apps. Shiny object syndrome is rampant with all of these dating apps because with the swipe of a hand, you can see another shiny object immediately at the end of your fingertips. And if you go on a date with someone, you can ghost them and go on another date with another shiny new object. The array and buffet of shiny objects on dating apps feels never ending. And the important thing that I think we have to remember, whether you're a writer or you're navigating dating in today's day and age, is that the grass isn't always greener. The shine will eventually wear off with that new book idea, and you'll be smack dab in the messy middle of a new manuscript all over again. Or after dating someone new for a while, the shine wears off. You start to see their real habits and traits emerge. And really, it's what are we going to do about it? Are you going to just hop and jump to the next shiny object? Or are you going to sit with it for a little bit, reevaluate and refocus on the big picture of, do I want to have a published book someday? Or do I want to get married and have a family? What is the purpose of writing? What is the purpose of dating? Come back to your why, and that's really where we have to start tackling shiny object syndrome. What's happening when we allow ourselves to focus on the shiny object is that our focus is actually narrowing. It's becoming smaller, and we lose the big picture of why we started writing this book in the first place. Ultimately, shiny object syndrome is a distraction. It's a procrastination method, something I am very skilled at. And now that we know what it is, now that we know why it happens, the real thing that we need to talk about is how can we overcome it? And the first thing that we should do, it sounds very simple, it's easy to overlook, it's easy to put off, but it's going back to your why. It's looking at the big picture of why you wanted to be an author in the first place, why you started down the path of this particular manuscript, and ultimately what you hope to accomplish with it. Do you want to get to the end of a first draft? Maybe that's enough, and you just want to finish a first draft, put it in a drawer, and then start on the new shiny object, the new shiny idea. That's okay, but focusing back and being aligned with that big picture goal is really important. Or do you actually want to have a published book on shelf? Do you want to have something finessed and finished that you can send off to a literary agent or that is ready to send to your editor at the publisher? That is going to take multiple steps. So you really, if you're starting a new shiny object, you're just putting yourself at the very beginning of that track. And maybe that's enough to keep you moving forward on your current work in progress. Also, I think just being aware that you are being hit with shiny object syndrome, that it is an affliction that happens to the best of authors and it can happen multiple times. Being aware that it's happening often is enough to say, okay, I know that my brain is just trying to distract me. It's trying to keep me safe. It's trying to keep me moving forward. This is shiny object syndrome. I'm not going to succumb to it this time. I find now that can simply be enough to say, nope, okay, Louise, time to refocus. This is what it is. You've been here before. Let's just keep our heads down, keep moving forward on the task at hand. I know there are a lot of authors out there who are very skilled multitaskers. They're able to juggle multiple books at once. They can flip back from writing a holiday Christmas novel to a horror murder mystery thriller. And for them, that's how they keep moving forward, is having something fun and light, like a Christmas rom-com that they're writing, and something a little bit darker. If that works for you, amazing. I wouldn't even call that shiny object syndrome. I would just say that's skilled multitasking, working on two book projects at one time, as long as you're moving both of them forward and you're not introducing a third book because you start hating the horror thriller novel that you're working on. So for me, that doesn't work. I have to focus on one manuscript at a time because I know that one idea will always take precedent over the other. One will be more fun to sit down and write at different stages of the process. One will be more fun to research when I get tired of sitting there and trying to come up with kind of the new tension point and moving the characters towards this conflict or climactic point of the book. I'm feeling stressed out about it, so I go to the other project. If I have that other book in the canon that I can return to, it will take me a lot longer to move forward. So that's just kind of a boundary, I guess you could say, or an expectation or a rule that I've implemented for myself is that I, once I have started down a path, I have had an idea accepted by my agent and my editor. That is the book that I'm moving forward towards. Maybe it'll get trashed at the end and it's terrible, but I at least must see it through to completion to the end of the manuscript to the end of the first draft. And only then will I know if it's trash or it's not even something that we can rework. But at least I feel good about the fact that I finished and focused on that one book at a time. That's just personally what works for me. And if I do get ideas, I often have new book ideas hit me while I'm on a walk or on the subway or in the shower. There are a lot of shiny objects always floating around my head. It's like this Harry Potter kind of little dazzling moments. Or if you've read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, she talks about all of these ideas that you can pull at that if you don't grasp them right then, they might go on to someone else. And for me, I will grasp them, but I have this one notebook. It's called Book Ideas and Inspiration. And I will put in all of these shiny ideas into that one notebook. Or if I write it, if I'm on the go in my notes app on my iPhone, I will always transfer it to this book ideas and inspiration notebook so that when I do finish the project that I'm working on, I open up that book and I can go back to that shiny idea. And actually, I think this is a really smart way to go about it because sometimes you will return to what you thought initially was the best, most amazing, perfect, glittery, sparkly idea. And you will go back and I will read what I wrote and I will say, you know what? That really wasn't that great of an idea. Why did I think this was so perfect at the time? It was just what was trendy or something that I really convinced myself was what needed to happen. But in giving myself distance from it, I actually did myself a service and realized, this might not be as great as I initially thought. I lower my expectations and kind of wade through it and see. So that is again another thing that I do is I have one notebook. The cover is actually sparkly. So I can grab it off of my shelf and I know it's my sparkly, shiny ideas notebook. You don't have to have a funky, sparkly, glittery notebook to do this, but for me, it's just something visual that I know this is where all the shiny ideas go. And another way that I personally overcome shiny object syndrome is going back to my original outline and plan. I am a plotter. I acknowledge that not every writer is a plotter. A lot of people are pantsers. I kind of dabble back and forth now with my new books. I'm trying both methods, but I really do think that when you get distracted, which is what shiny object syndrome is, going back to your original plan and your original outline will help you see how far you actually have come and how far you actually still have to go. So when you feel like the finish line is so far away, if you go back to that plan, you can see, nope, I have all of these chapters planned. I will get there. Look how far I've actually come. It becomes a lot more manageable. And if you are a pantser and you don't have an outline that you can go back to keep you focused on the task at hand, maybe the best thing that you can do if you're hit with this affliction and you feel yourself getting pulled to a new shiny idea, take one day off of writing and just sit there, loosely jot down the future of your book, where you see the characters going. It doesn't have to be chapter by chapter or something super strict, but I do think there's value in just quickly, loosely creating an idea of where your character is going next, getting a blank piece of paper and writing out or drawing all the different possible avenues of where your character could go and just follow one of those paths and give yourself a deadline. Just take one afternoon or one day, and that will help you focus and keep on task. Another thing that I do to tackle shiny object syndrome is that I have created an Excel spreadsheet tracker. And this keeps track of my successful projects. It's where I mark mini milestones along the way. It's where I keep track of the word count that I've hit that day. And this is also something that I visually color code. And so when I open up that Excel tracker, it is a reminder of my accomplishments, of how far I have come on this project. Because one of the biggest things of why you want to put this on the back burner and start one of the new shiny ideas that you have rolling around your head is because you feel like you're not really accomplished anything. There's no instant gratification. Why am I doing this? It feels like a waste of time and energy. It's just going to take me so long. But visually, when you open this tracker, even if it's 100 words that you wrote one day, that is moving the needle forward ever so slightly. You have accomplished something. You opened up your Word document. That in itself, I always say, is one of the biggest hurdles to starting. Is just plunking yourself down in the chair, opening up your laptop or your notebook, and rereading what you read. That is an accomplishment in itself, and just double clicking and opening the Scrivener or Word document app or Google Docs, that is moving the needle forward. Even if you just sat there and stared at the page and reread what you wrote the day before, it's all part of moving towards the bigger goal. So for me, looking at this color-coded word count tracker, or even just turning my head and looking at my bookshelf and seeing my own book on shelf, looking at the poster of my book cover, reminds me not only what I have accomplished and how far I have come and what happens when I continue to keep my head down and fulfill my original goal of working on one manuscript at a time. I not only see how far I've come, but it also highlights how close I am to the finish line. And that's really important to see the past, what you have done, but also helps you keep yourself focused and centered and moving forward towards that goal when something else, this shiny carrot, is dangling itself in front of you. Another tip, because shiny object syndrome is a procrastination method, is to set a Pomodoro timer. You can get a free one online. I use pomofocus.io. You can just type it into Google, free Pomodoro timer. That gets you working in 25-minute increments with little mini breaks here and there, and that will help you refocus and execute on the task at hand. I also will turn off my phone, turn off the Wi-Fi, put my phone completely in another room so that there are zero distractions and I can't find myself trying to go into Pinterest to create character arcs or open up Scrivener and start a new project. This is just what I'm working on at the time. And a lot of the time, I will actually just go outside with a plain old notebook and pen and go back to basics so that I can't even be tempted to go on technology at all. It's just really pen and paper and see what I can accomplish that day. And then my last tip is to give yourself rewards, not just at the end when you complete a manuscript, but mini rewards along the way is what will help keep you focused. Because sometimes if the reward is just at the very end, or when I get this book published, then I will treat myself, that's not really enticing you to keep going because it just seems so far away. So even for me, a mini reward is I'm going to go for a walk and buy myself a coffee at lunch if I hit this word count during the day. That's a mini reward that will keep me moving forward on one project and not start from scratch on a brand new book idea. Another reward could be as simple as, okay, if I hit this certain word count, I will treat myself to ordering in Thai and a Netflix relaxing movie night in. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be something super crazy or materialistic. It's just these little things that make you feel good. It could be pouring a bath with a glass of wine. And that is something that you will treat yourself with when you hit that mini milestone. And I find all of those things are just great ways to keep things in perspective and keep pushing forward instead of starting from scratch on a shiny new idea. So really at the end of the day, I know it seems exciting to want to chase that shiny object, that dangling carrot in front of you, to do something that seems more fun than the challenge and task at hand. But ultimately, just remember the big picture, why you started. Being aware of shiny object syndrome is the first step. Have things in place that you can always go back to, like your plan, your outline, your tracker. Reward yourself with the mini milestones along the way to remind yourself of how much you've accomplished and how close you are to the top of that mountain at the end of the day and seeing your book on shelf. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe and leave a comment on Apple iTunes. It really helps more people find out about the Word Weaver podcast. Until next time.